DuEt. Here we go.
Good day to storytellers and supporters of storytelling. I just wanted to greet you in this room because I know many of you have been in it, and we've had many ceilidhs in the room. And my friend Pepe, chief engineer in the house, is going to remind you of the room by just showing you it quickly. So that should have been a reminder to some of you of many pleasant evenings, including you, Sven.
That room is, when you come into that room, it's so full of joy, and there's so many stories to be told, and has been told so many stories in that room. Yeah, I remember the first time I came, it was your singing group, the singing group that Scott organized. And you sat there with all these wonderful people, and it was just open-hearted and just with the arms out like this, come inside, have a nice ceilidh, and we did lots of songs. Hello, David.
Hello. Right. So Sven has asked me to tell the first story, a great honor, and so I'm going to tell a story that I heard from a beautiful storytelling man in the island of Shetland, George Peterson. So I want to take you to the very north of Scotland, over the stormy North Sea, through and past Orkney, and on to the bleak islands of Shetland. And these islands in some ways are bleak, but not in hospitality, and not in some other strange things. You need to beware because a sea mist may creep in upon you. It is, of course, famous for fiddles, and on many walls in many houses, you'll find fiddles hanging. And the other feature of Shetland is that it has its own brand of little people, the Trowie people. And these are little snub-nosed creatures, maybe about up to your knee. They're either very apple-cheeked, of course, either red hair or dark hair. Well, Ranald Johnson, of course, himself was a fiddler. And being a fiddler in Shetland, he was in demand everywhere for ceilidhs, for Christmases, for New Year's, for every kind of celebration. And he was only 2 weeks married when our story begins. And he said to his new and lovely wife, Janet, I have been invited to play at a wedding this afternoon. And Janet said, oh, very good, Ranald. And wilt thou be home for thy supper? He said, what is for supper? She said, Ranald, it is leek and tatty soup. Oh, he said, that is my favorite. I will not fail. She said, Ranald, do knowest what it will be like. There will be the big hospitality. There will be the talking about relations. There will be your own fiddle playing, and there will be stories, and there will be songs, and there will, of course, be whiskey. Are you sure you will be home for thy supper? And said, Janet, my dear and darling wife, if you're making leek and tatty soup, I will not fail. She said, do not fail. So he tucked his fiddle under his arm, and off he went. And of course, the Shetland wedding was a Shetland wedding. There was the redding up of kin, talking about relations. There was the stories. There was everything that had happened in between times. And then there were things to eat, little snacks, and then, of course, the whiskey. And then they said, now, Ranald, wilt to play thy fiddle? And so Ranald took out his fiddle, and he was playing every kind of jig and strathspey and reel and Shetland tunes. and the afternoon was flying past. And at last, of course, the lady of the house said, "Well, Ranald, wilt thou stay for thy supper?" He said, "Oh, yeah." Oh, he said, no, I cannot stay for my supper. Thou knowest, I'm only 2 weeks married, and I have been invited by Janet to have leek and tatty soup, and it is my favourite. I will not fail her." She said, "Well, next time, Ranald, be sure to come here again." And he said, "I will." So Ranald took his fiddle once more and set off. And as he walked out, he walked into a white blanketing sea mist. And as he's walking along, suddenly he realized he was surrounded by hundreds of the little people. And one with a grey beard looked up at him and said, "Du art Ranald Johnson?" He said, "I am Ranald Johnson." He said, "Du art a fiddler?" He said, "I am a fiddler." He said, "We know about you." He said, "You do seem to know a lot about me." He said, "More than you think." He said, "Ranald, thou knowest that a wedding is no wedding without a fiddle." Oh, Ranald said, "That is right. It is no wedding without a fiddle." The little man looked very sad. He said, "Ranald, we are having a trowie wedding. We have not had one for 300 years, and we have no fiddle player. Wilt you come and play a pretty little tune?" And Ranald said, "Well, I would like to, but I've promised my wife Janet that I will be home for leek and tatty soup." The little man looked so sad. He said, "Wilt you not come and play a pretty little tune?" And Ranald said, "I will come and play one pretty little tune." And at that, suddenly, there was a great, beautiful white mare there, and 3 little men went hop, 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 and Ranald was astride the mare, and it was galloping through the mist. It was breaking as fast behind as it was in front, breaking and gathering and breaking, and then it came to a halt. The 3 little men said, "Down, whoop, whoop." And he looked, and there on the hillside was a tunnel, a little cave. And the men said, "Follow us." And so Ranald followed them into the cave, and there's little candles there, maybe they weren't bigger than your little finger. And he followed the men all the way down through passages and came at last to a great hall. And in the great hall, there was a whole congregation of the little people, and they were all looking forward. And there in front of them stood a lady in a grass green skirt, beautiful red hair, and beside a man in a slate grey suit, and in front a little trowie priest. And he was saying, "I do now pronounce thee trowie man and trowie wife." And the 2 were very happy. And he said, "Do mayest kiss." And they came together, smack and kiss, and everybody went, "Oh!" Everybody was delighted. And then the little man said, "Now, Ranald, play thy fiddle." So Ranald took out his fiddle, and if he played well before, he'd never played better. He played all the jigs and reels and strathspeys and Shetland tunes. And then, as his fingers jumped over the keys like electrical sparks, he played tunes he didn't even know. And on he played, and on he played. And at last he was tired, and the little man ran up and said, "Ranald, thank thee. That is enough." And then the little man looked a little sad again and said, "Ranald, we have no yellow gold or silver gold to give thee." "Oh," Ranald said, "I need no thanks except the joy I've seen in thy dancing." And so the little man said, "But I have something for thee." I said, "What is that?" He said, "I will tell thee something. Thy wife and thou, Janet, are going to have 4 little bairnies." Oh, Ranald said, 4 bairnies, that's lovely. He said, "The first little one will be a little girl." Oh, Ranald said, "I'd love a little girl, a little girl." He looked serious again and said, "Ranald, this little girl is going to come into the world, howling and yowling and squealing and screeching, louder than every little girl was screaming in the whole of Shetland. Oh, Ranald said, that is not so good. No, no. Then the little man said, you'll have a little boy. Ranald said, I'd love a little boy, lovely. The man said, no. He said, if that little girl was loud, this one will be louder, howling and yowling, screaming and screeching, so much that you'd hear his little cries in the Skagerrak in Sweden. Oh, Ranald said, that is not good. That is not good. But the little man said, I have something to give thee. Come close, come close, come close. And Ranald listened, and he heard this sound. Did you hear, said the little man. Oh, Ranald said, I did hear. He said, will you remember, said the little man. He said, I am a fiddler. Of course I will remember. The little man said, if you play that tune, that little howling, yowling girl or howling, yowling boy will fall asleep like angels. Now, come on. And he beckoned. And all the men went running up the passages again. And Ranald came afterwards. And the candles now were just about gone altogether. And outside there was the beautiful white mare and the three little men went hop, hop, hop. And Ranald was on. The mist was breaking in front as fast as it was gathering behind. On they went and suddenly came to a halt. And Ranald came down from the horse. And the little man said, do not forget that tune. He said, I will not. And Ranald looked again. The horse was gone. The little men were gone. And then Ranald said, ah, my leek and tatty soup. Oh, 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 oh. So he came into the house, and when he came in, there was Janet, sitting like a face of ice. He said, I came for my soup. She said, thy soup is on the table. Where hast thou been? He said, I was playing. I was at the wedding. We went to the table. He lifted a spoon of the soup. It was cold. It was slimy. It was stinking. It was maggoty. He said, Janet, this is no soup. She said, it was soup 2 weeks ago when you left the house. Where hast you been? Oh, he said, I told you I did but play it. Well, I played at a Trowie wedding. Oh, Ranald, she said, you played at a Trowie wedding and you hast come back? He said, of course I came back for leek and tatty soup. She said, dost do not know, Ranald. She threw her arms around him. Dost do not know that Trowie time is not our time. It could have been 7 years, 14 years, 41 years. Oh, they have let you come back. He said, yes, they knew about the leek and tatty soup. Well, anyhow, whatever. When the first one was born, it was a howling, yowling, squealing, screeching little girl. Ranald took out his fiddle and the bairnie fell asleep like an angel. And of course, when the second one was born, the same thing. But Ranald was not always at home. But of course, Janet was a very resourceful woman. And so Janet sang a few words to the tune. Shabamam spiri fleur, Sleep, oh sleep, come tarry soon. Mam shall watch dear by her, till thy bonny sleep be done. Till thy bonny sleep be done. Till thy bonny sleep be done. Mam shall watch dear by her, till thy bonny sleep be done. And of course, the bairnies fell asleep like angels, and the truth is, that little Trowie lullaby from Shetland still works to this day. And if any of you have a yowling, howling, shrieking, squealing kid, all you need to do is take out your fiddle, and if you haven't a fiddle, you can take out a mouth organ even, or you can sing it a song. And that is the end of my story.
Thank you, David. Such a joy sitting here and just be overwhelmed by all these lovely pictures from a total different place. You love that place, right?
Oh yeah, I love Shetland, absolutely. Orkney, Shetland, these islands are, Orkney especially, but Shetland, with its fiddle players, Ali being the great fiddle player from there, and great men like George Peterson I visited. And in Shetland, I mean, you go into the house and it's never take one, it's tack two. If it's scones, if it's shortbread, if it's whiskey, you never get just one. It's a wonderful, hospitable place.
It reminded me of when you told about the soup, how wonderful it was. Of a story from Spain. It's down by Andalusia, where there was this woman. She was wife of a mayor, and she really enjoyed and loved the company of her husband, but she loved and enjoyed company of other men as well. So when the king heard that, he went down to her and said, "You are not going to do that. You have to stop immediately, or I will drag you and I will hang you, and it's really bad." And the wife just said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know, but I don't want to be dragged up to your castle and being hanged like that. But what I would suggest instead is that you come for dinner here for a whole year, and then we can talk. Would that be nice?" I don't really get this, but yes, I can tell my cook that he can go home and not prepare the dinner. I can come down here and have some food. That's fine. And it was only the dinner. So he had his wonderful lunch. He had his breakfast and lunch, and then he walked down to the house, to the wife, to the mayor's house there. And he opened the door, and the first thing that came to him was the smell. Was the smell of the food. It was delicious. It was just wonderful. That the bird, a peasant, and he was lying on some nuts, and there was some sauce there. It was just wonderful, incredible. And he was just going, oh, is this going to be for all year? I'm going to have something like this. And oh, it's brilliant. I would love that. So he went home. Next evening, he came in. It was the same smell that came to him. And it was the same, not the same bird, but it was the same recipes he had used for this peasant with this nuts and this beautiful sauce. And he was eating it with delight, definitely. After a week, peasant on nuts with this orange, beautiful sauce, he was kind of getting a little bit, it's wonderful still, but I would really like something else. And after a month, is it Jose? Well, after a month of peasants on the most wonderful, delicious sauce, he was so tired of it. So he just, when he saw it, he was going like, I can't stand it anymore. Don't you have a potato? Don't you have some rice? Don't you have some daily food? And she looked at him with a smile and said, that's exactly how I have, my feelings are with men. I mean, I can go for the wonderful thing, but sometimes I just need to have something different, just to be inspired. But you can come here again tomorrow if you like and have more of this peasants on it. No, never in a lifetime. I would never, never, never. And you can have your men. And then he turned around and he walked back into his castle. And that woman were allowed to have lovers in her house. That's the end of that story. I'm not really sure about the moral though. But David, I have planned something for you, because it's a whole thing about this DuEt is that we share stories this way. I get inspired by you. I tell you a story about food, and then I was planning this, and then I thought about a story that I've heard, that I actually read many years ago in a little tiny book like this. It is called Danish Folkeeventyr, but then I realized it's actually from Germany, this story. But here we go. It was a king, and he was old, and he was getting so old, so he said to the prince, please, prince, come inside here. And then the prince stood next to the king's bed, and the king said, it's time for me to go soon. Before I'd go, I like to see the queen, your queen, the queen that has to be the queen in this country for many, many years. Go out in the world and find that woman. But how can I do that, Daddy? Well, you know the room at the highest tower in the castle where you're not allowed to go? Yes. Here is a gold key. Open the door and you will find what you're looking for. So he went up to the highest tower in the castle, opened the door with the golden key, and there inside was 4 windows. In front of every window there were a picture. It was alive. And on the pictures there were women. And the first woman had a green, you know, that kind of the color of a new opened leaf, and the sun is in the beginning of May. You have this forest that looks like it's so vulnerable that it's most beautiful color I know. That was the color of her dress. So that was beautiful. So he looked at the next one, all the colors of the summer right there in front of you, with all the flowers, roses, yellow, everything. And then he looked at the third. It had the color of the autumn, brown, red, orange. And then he turned around, and the fourth picture had like a little, it was like a cloth, a white cloth hanging. And when he looked inside, there was this white woman. Her cheek was pale, but you can see a slight color very far away beneath that. And she smiled a most delicate smile, and he knew in that moment that was her. So he turned around, walked down, and told his father, I've chosen. It is going to be the white one. And he said, oh, the white one, that's going to be hard. Are you ready for that? I'm ready for everything, said the young man. It's far away. You just have to go north, out of the forest, into the wilds, and find your way into, there's a big castle there, and you will find her. So he started riding off with his horse, but he didn't go far before the forest was thick and he couldn't move anywhere, and he was just going, this is not going to work for me. And then he just cried out, help, help! And then he heard over his head, there was this sound like crushing feet. And then he heard that the forest, somebody just took away the trees and looked, and he looked up in a big smiling face. Did anyone ask for help? Yes, it's me. Can you help me? Yeah, where are you going? Well, north. We have to find a castle, and there's a beautiful woman there. Yeah, let's go. And then he took the prince, sat him on the shoulder, raised up, and he was like taller than the tallest tree in the forest. My name is 7 Mile Step, and now you'll see why. 1 7 mile, 1 7 mile, and he was walking fast. Then he came to a man who was sitting next to a big mountain, and he had a scarf in front of his eyes. And 7 Mile Step stopped and said, you should talk to him. And the prince went down and asked, why are you sitting there with this scarf in front of you? Well, if I look at the mountain, it would disappear. I don't believe that. So he opened the eyes, and the mountain just crumbled, became dust, and flew away. I'm Shabai, said the man. I can see everything, and if I look intensely enough at something, it would just crush. Well, do we want to go on a little adventure? Yeah, sure. So up on the shoulder, and 7 Mile Step walked, and then there was this fat boy. It was like a fat boy. It was really fat. And they stopped, and the prince asked, who are you? I'm Eat It All. I can eat it all. Well, you want to go on an adventure? Yeah. So now there were 4 of them coming to this castle. And in the castle, everything was frozen. There was this knight who was standing with a sword. There was this boy who was trying to take the feathers out of a chicken. There was this dog who was barking at, trying to catch a cat. Everything was frozen. So she came out of the door. The picture, she was beautiful, but it was nothing to compare with the real one. She was shining in her whiteness, but behind her came this big, massive wizard. He had a big coat on with 3 rings of iron, and he stood there and he looked at the prince and said, so you think you're going to have yourself a princess? You are not. I'm going to give you 3 tasks. The first one starts right now when I say goodnight to you. In the morning, the only thing I want is to find the princess still in the room. So that was an easy task, they thought. Can we can sing a song, can't we? Yeah, we can sing a song. So they sang a song. You can tell a story, and they told a story. The only thing they needed was to keep awake. But at one point, they started snoring, and they woke up with a princess was gone. And of course, Sharp-Eye looked and found her. She was an acorn in the forest. 7 Mile Step ran out, took the acorn, ran back, placed it, and there was the princess. And the wizard came in, angry, and one of the rings fell off. Next day it's not going to be that easy. So next night the same thing happened. They tried to be awake, but they fell asleep. And in the morning they woke up and she was gone, far away. And Sharp-Eye looked, and there inside the mountain was a diamond. So Sharp-Eye on the back of 7 miles ran up to the mountain, looked at the mountain, and it became dust. They took the diamond and they ran in and placed it, and there was a princess. The wizard came in, and another ring fell. The third night, they really tried. All they could, all the songs they knew, all the stories they were singing, they were telling, they were doing all kind of things, but they fell asleep. And when they woke up in the morning, the princess was gone. Far away, sharp-eyed looked, couldn't find her. They heard the wizard coming in with the last ring around his big stomach. And then Edith said, try in the ocean. And he found her. It was a little pearl. But when they came down to the ocean, he couldn't reach out. He couldn't reach all the way down there. So Edith had to swallow half an ocean. And then he could take the pearl, and he ran, but he could see he couldn't catch it. He was running there with the pearl, and the wizard was coming all the way up, took his key, was about to open it. So he threw the pearl, and in the moment he stepped in, the pearl flew down into the window, crashed the window, and there was the princess. So the last ring fell off, and he became a raven. And the raven flew out of the window. So now she had colors in her cheeks. And of course, everything came alive. The horse, the dog, the boy, the one with the, and they all came alive in that place. And when the old king saw her, he knew that that was the right choice. And the three helpers were invited for the party, but they were all gone to the next one who wanted to help. So if you want help, David, from somebody who can run, who can eat, and who can see, you just call out into the air and say, help me. Steffi's still around, I'm sure.
Nice, thank you. Lovely. Okay, Sven, two stories have come into my head. The one is more inspired by the first story, by the food and that kind of thing in that story, and the other one more by the challenge in the second one. Well, I think that I'll tell the first one, that was to do with food. And so I had this story from Nina Nasheim. You may know her from Norway, a fantastic woman, a great storyteller, and one of the most mischievous human beings in God's earth. I think I'm pretty good that way. But Nina is the queen, absolutely. I mean, just to give a tiny taste of where I got it from, Nina was had met someone of great importance, and they invited her to the firm's dinner in a very, very posh place. But she appeared in heavy disguise as a kind of baggy woman, and big horn-rimmed glasses and straggly hair. And she presented herself, and the receptionist said, where are you going? She says, I'm going to the dinner. And they said, I'm very sorry. It's just, couples from the firm. She said, no, she says, I was invited to the dinner. She said, I was invited by that man. And I said, all right. And so she came in, and we put her at a table, and she immediately started to crane around. And they said, they were a bit amazed anyhow at the sight of her, far less anything else. And she was looking around and said, Who are you looking for? She says, I'm looking for that man that I met in a singles bar. And, you know, I was sure he'd be here. I thought, a singles bar? Was somebody here going to be hugely embarrassed altogether? And she's looking around all over the place, and she's chattering wildly. And then the director got up to give a speech, and she said, all right, I want to say something. She jumped onto the stage, and they said, excuse me, but, you know, she said, no, I need to say something. And then, to their amazement, she sort of threw off her glasses and straightened her hair and stretched down. She planted somebody in the audience, took out her guitar and says, I am invited to entertain you. So, I mean, yeah, Nina was unbelievable.
Sounds like a special woman.
Yeah, she is, anyhow. But anyhow, this is the story she told me. And this is a little tune. From the far north, whistling this tune and humming the tune, came this vagabond, and he was whistling as he came along, and he was looking around everywhere, came out of the forest and saw in the distance a little house, a cottage. And from the cottage there was coming, as light was falling, a light. And so he approached the cottage. And as he did so, the woman of the house looked out, and she saw this slightly disreputable character appearing. And he came up to where she was, and he said, "Good evening, gracious madam. Good evening, gracious madam." And she said, "Well, you don't even know me. What's so gracious about that then?" She says, "Oh, you seem like a gracious lady, a gracious lady." She says, "Where do you come from?" He says, "I come from east of the sun and west of the moon." And she said, "And where are you bound for?" "I'm bound to seek my fortune, and you are on my way." And she thought, there's a smooth-tongued character, this. And he said, "So I'm asking you for your hospitality." She said, "Hospitality," she said, "hospitality? You're asking me for hospitality?" She says, "Here am I, a poor widow woman, a scrap in the house, nothing to eat myself, hardly a thing to keep the fire going. No," she said, "I can't give you any hospitality." And he said, "Oh, gentle mother, you know it is written, you should be kind to strangers, and it will be much rewarded." She says, "And are folk kind to me?" And he said, "Well, you never know how fortune might change for you, and how you may be surprised in many ways." Anyhow, he was so smooth-tongued and so forth. She said, "All right, you can come in, but I can assure you, I have nothing for you to eat." And he said, "Well," he said, "perhaps in that case," he said, "I can give you something." She said, "You can give me something?" He says, "Yes, I can give you something." So he didn't seem to have anything. He said, "Have you got a pot?" She said, "Yes." "And some water?" She said, "Yes." "And we could kindle up the fire if you got sticks. And if you could kindle up the fire, I could make something." So remarkably, she found some sticks and kindled up the fire and put on the pot. And it began to bubble, and she's looking. Nothing seems to be happening. She said, "What are you going to do?" He says, "I'm going to make stone soup." And he took out this stone. She said, "Stone soup?" Her eyes were goggling. Dropped it into the pan. Began to stir. And he said, "Oh, this would be a really good enough soup if it just had maybe just a wee bit of potatoes and rice, she said. She said, oh yes, it would be fit for anybody's table then. So she thought, well, potatoes and rice. So she just covered, of course, potatoes and rice, and in it went. And he's stirring and stirring and stirring. Oh, he says, it's coming on very well, all right. It's nice enough, but it needs a little salt. And I mean, if it had a salty bacon, that would be even more amazing. It would be fit for gentle folk. Oh, she thought, fit for gentle folk. Oh, so she found a bit of bacon and a bit of salt, and he's stirring, stirring, and as he stirred, she stared, and he stirred, and she stared, and then he said, well, it's coming on very, very well. You know, I remember when I was at the house of a nobleman, this very soup was made, but it did have a bit of meat in it and some leeks and some carrots. And then the whole of the man's table was rejoicing. Oh, she thought, well, if that's all it needs, well. So of course, suddenly she discovered that she had exactly a bit of mutton and some potatoes and some leeks, and in the went, he's stirring and stirring and stirring, and then he says, you know, this soup could be fit for a king if only it had just a few more choice vegetables. So she rummaged about, and in the went, and he says, ah, that is it. That soup is fit for a king. He says, when I was a guest in that house as a servant, of course, he said, you know, the king sat down to the soup, and of course, he had a bit of schnapps with it, and that just was putting the final taste to it. And she thought, oh, schnapps. And he said, yes, and he had a fine cloth on the table. So the next thing was a fine cloth on the table. There's the schnapps. And he said, so they dish out the soup, and she says, soup fit for a king. Imagine him knowing that secret of soup fit for a king. And so they dined together, and afterwards, of course, they had coffee and they had the schnapps. And she said, he said, well, I'll just lie down on the floor. Oh, no, I can't let you lie on the floor. No, you will have my bed, and I'll go into the little spare room. No, you can have my bed. So he had the bed, and she said to herself, yeah, what an extraordinary man, a wonderful secret. And so in the morning, she wakened him with some nice coffee with a little schnapps in it, very Scandinavian style. And so he wakened up, and she said, men like you don't meet every day. And he said, well, that's true enough. And she said, and soup like that, you don't get every day. And he said, no, that's true enough. It's easy enough if you just have one of the two of the secrets. And so she blessed him on his way, and he went on his way, and she was saying, what a wonderful man. That's Mila's story.
Story, what a wonderful story. Thank you, David. That was wonderful. And the steering and the stirring.
Yes, I know.
There's something about words that you just
as well, that's true.
taste them.
They had a taste to the story, don't they? Yes. Yeah.
Are you going to give us a little tune to say farewell and thank you for today?
Could easily do that. And thank you very much for the day.
Thank you.
Let me think. What tune? I got cheery tune.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Very
Okay,
nice.
see you soon out in the world.
Yes, would be nice. That would be nice.
Yeah. Thank you, David Campbell. Have a lovely evening. See you.